the first time Willa Thompson saw Marcus Reeves. She was 8 years old and convinced horses were beautiful, terrifying creatures that existed solely to embarrass her in front of her father's ranch hands. It was the summer of 1867 in Tonopah Junction, Nevada, where the desert stretched endless and unforgiving, and the silver mines brought rough men with rougher dreams. Marcus was 16 then, lean and sunburned, hired on by her father to break horses and mend fences. She watched him from the porch as he gentled a skittish mare with nothing but patience and a low, steady voice that somehow carried across the dusty yard. When he caught her staring, he tipped his hat and grinned, and Willa felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. 7 years later, everything had changed. Willa was 15, tall and restless, with her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn streak. The ranch felt smaller every day, the same faces, the same conversations about water rights and cattle prices. Marcus had grown into himself during those years, his shoulders broader, his jaw stronger, but his eyes still held that same kindness she remembered. He was 23 now, her father's most trusted hand, the man who could track a lost steer through a sandstorm and repair a wagon wheel with nothing but wire and determination. It happened on a morning when the sun painted the rocks copper and gold. Willa had been pestering her father for months to let her really ride. Not the sedate walks around the corral on the old gelding, but proper riding, the kind that meant freedom. Her father, distracted by a dispute with a neighboring ranch over a spring, finally relented with a wave of his hand. He told Marcus to teach her, to keep her safe, to make sure she did not break her neck or his trust. Marcus met her at the stable with a paint horse named Juniper, a 4-year-old mare with intelligent eyes and a gentle disposition. "She will take care of you," he said, running a hand down the mare's neck. "But you have to take care of her too. Horses know when you are afraid, when you are angry, when you are lying to them. They are honest creatures. You have to be honest back." Willa nodded, her heart hammering as she reached out to touch Juniper's soft muzzle. The mare's breath was warm against her palm, and she smelled like hay and summer dust. Marcus showed her how to approach from the side, how to let the horse see her coming, how to speak in that same low, steady voice he used. He adjusted the stirrups and checked the cinch twice, his hands quick and capable, and then he helped her mount, his palm steady against her boot as she swung into the saddle. The world looked different from up there, bigger and brighter. Marcus swung onto his own horse, a tall bay gelding named Copper, and they walked out into the open range beyond the corrals. He taught her how to sit deep in the saddle, how to move with the horse instead of against it, how to use her legs and her weight to communicate. They walked first, then trotted, and by the end of that first week they were cantering across the flats, the wind pulling at her hair, the horizon endless ahead. Those lessons became the best part of Willa's days. Marcus was patient but demanding, never letting her get away with sloppy form or half-hearted effort. He made her do things over until she got them right, but he also celebrated every small victory, every moment when she and Juniper moved as one. They rode out to places she had never seen before, hidden springs tucked into rocky canyons, meadows where wildflowers bloomed improbably in the desert, old mining camps abandoned and slowly being reclaimed by the earth. They talked while they rode, or while they rested the horses in the shade. Marcus told her about growing up in Missouri, about losing his parents to fever when he was 12, about making his way west with nothing but a bedroll and determination. He spoke about the things he had seen, the places he wanted to go, the ranch he dreamed of owning someday. Willa told him about feeling trapped, about wanting more than what Tonopah Junction offered, about the books she read late at night by candlelight. Stories of cities and oceans and lives nothing like her own. He listened to her in a way no one else did, not dismissing her dreams as childish fancy, but asking questions, pushing her to think deeper. When she said she wanted to see San Francisco, he described the bay as he had heard it described, the fog rolling in like a living thing, the ships crowding the harbor. When she said she felt invisible sometimes, he looked at her with such focused attention that she felt seen all the way through. The summer turned hotter, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer and sent everyone indoors during the worst of the afternoon. They adjusted their rides to early morning or evening when the temperature dropped and the light turned golden. One evening in late August, they rode out to a place Marcus had found, a natural pool fed by an underground spring, tucked into a formation of red rocks. The water was startlingly clear and cold, and they let the horses drink while they sat in the shade. Willa was quiet, watching the way the light played on the water, thinking about how the summer was ending, how soon the routine would shift back to the careful boundaries of before. Marcus must have sensed her mood because he asked what was wrong. "Nothing is wrong," she said. "Everything is right, and that is the problem. I do not want this to end." He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "Willa, you know this cannot be anything other than what it is. Your father trusts me. You are 15. I will be 16 in October. And I am 23. I work for your father. There are lines that cannot be crossed." She turned to look at him then, her eyes fierce. "I am not talking about crossing lines. I am talking about how you are the only person who treats me like I have a mind and a soul worth knowing. I am talking about how when I am with you, I feel like myself, like the person I am supposed to be." Marcus's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "You are extraordinary, Willa. You are smart and brave and you see things clearly. But you are young and you have a whole life ahead of you. In a few years, you will look back on this summer and it will just be a good memory. Do not tell me what I will feel," she said, her voice shaking. "Do not diminish this." He reached out then, almost touched her hand but pulled back at the last second. "I am not. I am trying to protect you and myself. If your father thought for 1 second that I had feelings for you, feelings that were not appropriate, he would run me off this ranch and probably shoot me for good measure." "Do you," she asked, "have feelings for me?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, Marcus stood, brushing dust from his pants. "We should head back. It is getting late." They did not talk on the ride home. The easy companionship of the summer felt fractured, replaced by an awareness that made every accidental touch feel loaded with meaning. When they reached the ranch, Marcus helped her dismount, and their eyes met for a heartbeat too long. Then he stepped back, tipped his hat, and led both horses into the barn without another word. The next weeks were careful and strained. They still had their riding lessons, but Marcus kept them shorter, kept conversation to safe topics, maintained a physical distance that felt like miles. Willa ached with it, with wanting to return to how things had been, knowing they could not. She caught him watching her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention, and the look in his eyes was complicated and sad. In late September, her father announced that Marcus would be driving a herd of cattle to California in early October, a trip that would take at least 6 weeks. It was good money, an opportunity Marcus could not refuse. Willa felt the news like a physical blow, but she kept her face carefully neutral at the dinner table, nodding when her father talked about logistics and timing. The night before Marcus was set to leave, Willa could not sleep. She got up in the dark hours before dawn and slipped out to the stables. She was not sure what she hoped to accomplish, only that she could not let him leave without saying something true. She found him there, checking tack by lantern light, preparing for the long drive ahead. "I knew you would come," he said quietly, not looking up from the bridle he was examining. "I could not let you leave without saying goodbye properly." He set down the bridle and finally met her eyes. In the warm glow of the lantern, his face looked older, tired. "Willa, this is not goodbye. I will be back before winter sets in hard. Everything feels different, like once you leave it will never be the same." Marcus crossed the space between them then, and for the first time he let himself touch her face, his palm gentle against her cheek. "You are right. It will not be the same because you will keep growing and changing. You will meet people, have experiences, become more of who you are meant to be. But I will carry this summer with me. I will carry you with me. You have to know that." Tears burned in Willa's eyes. "I love you. I know I am not supposed to say that. I know all the reasons it is complicated and impossible, but it is true, and I needed you to know." His thumb brushed away the tear that escaped down her cheek. "You are going to have an amazing life, Willa Thompson. You are going to do extraordinary things." "That is not an answer. It is the only answer I can give you right now." He leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle and final. "Be safe, be brave, be everything you are meant to be." Then he stepped back and the moment was over. Willa fled back to the house, her heart breaking and soaring at the same time, the ghost of his touch still warm on her skin. Marcus left with the dawn. Willa watched from her window as the herd moved out, a river of brown and dust, Marcus riding point on copper. He did not look back at the house, and she was grateful for that small mercy. The weeks passed slowly. October brought cooler temperatures and news that the cattle drive was going well. November brought early snow to the high passes, and a letter from Marcus, addressed to her father but clearly meant for the whole family, describing the terrain and the challenges and the successful sale. He mentioned everyone by name in his closing remarks, including Willa, wishing her a happy 16th birthday and hoping Juniper was being exercised properly. December brought tragedy. A rider came in the night with news that Marcus's group had been hit by bandits on the return journey through the high desert. There had been a fight. 2 men were dead. Marcus had taken a bullet and made it to a town called Silver Creek, but the wound was bad. By the time help arrived, by the time anyone got word back to Tonopah Junction, 3 weeks had passed. Willa's father rode out immediately with the ranch foreman and 2 other men. They returned 8 days later, grim-faced and quiet. Her father called her into his study, and she knew from his expression what he was going to say before he said it. Marcus did not make it. The infection was too much. He was buried in Silver Creek. "I am sorry, Willa. I know he was teaching you to ride. I know you had become friends. Friends." The word was so inadequate it was almost laughable. But Willa nodded, keeping her face still, her grief locked down tight where her father could not see it. She thanked him for telling her and walked calmly to her room. Only then, with the door closed and the night pressing against the window, did she let herself shatter. She mourned privately, fiercely. No one knew the true depth of what she had lost except her, and that made it lonelier. She went through the motions of daily life, helping her mother with the house, reading, doing her chores. She rode Juniper sometimes, but it hurt too much, so eventually she stopped. The mare stood in the pasture and watched her with confused, gentle eyes, but Willa could not bear it. Spring came, and with it, her father's announcement that he had sold the ranch. The silver mines were playing out, water was getting scarcer, and he had received a good offer from a mining company that wanted the land. They were moving to Sacramento, where her uncle had a business and opportunities were better. Willa felt nothing at the news. One place was as good as another when the person you loved was gone. Sacramento was green and crowded. nothing like Tanapa Junction. Her uncle ran a supply company that provisioned the mining towns in the Sierra Nevada, and her father went to work managing logistics. Willa was enrolled in a proper school, the first time she had been in a classroom with other girls her age. She was behind in some subjects, ahead in others, strange and quiet in ways that made her difficult to befriend. The years unfolded. Willa finished school and went to work in her uncle's office, managing accounts and correspondence. She was good with numbers, good with details, and she liked the work because it kept her mind occupied. Men courted her or tried to, but she kept them at a distance. None of them made her feel anything close to what she had felt that summer when she was 15. None of them looked at her the way Marcus had, like she was a person worth knowing all the way through. When she was 21, her mother sat her down and gently suggested that perhaps Willa was holding out for something that did not exist, that perhaps it was time to consider building a real life with someone steady and kind. Willa listened politely and did not change her behavior. She knew what love felt like, and she was not willing to settle for less. Her father died when she was 25, a sudden heart attack that left her mother devastated and the family scrambling. Willa stepped up, taking over more of her father's responsibilities, proving herself capable in ways that made her uncle rely on her more and more. She traveled sometimes, riding out to the mining camps to check on orders and deliveries, and on those trips she felt closest to the girl she had been, riding across the Nevada desert with the wind in her hair. Time moved on. Her mother remarried, a kind banker who treated her well. Willa stayed in the supply business, eventually becoming her uncle's full partner. She was respected, successful, independent in ways that raised eyebrows but also grudging admiration. She bought her own small house, kept her own counsel, lived her life on her own terms. She thought about Marcus often, especially on hard days or beautiful ones. She wondered what he would have thought of the person she had become, whether he would be proud or surprised or both. The grief had dulled to a steady ache, manageable but always present, a part of her landscape. She was 30 years old when her uncle told her about the new contract. A ranch outside of a town called Clearwater Springs, about 40 miles east of Sacramento, needed a reliable supplier for a large-scale operation. They were raising cattle and horses, had big plans, and wanted to establish a long-term relationship. Her uncle wanted Willa to handle it personally, to go out and assess their needs, negotiate terms, be the face of the company. Willa agreed. It was a beautiful fall day when she drove the wagon out toward Clearwater Springs, the air crisp and the light golden. The countryside was rolling hills studded with oaks, greener than the desert of her childhood but still recognizably the West. The ranch, when she found it, was impressive. Well-maintained buildings, solid fences, horses grazing in large pastures, and cattle dotting the distant hills. She was tying off the wagon when a man emerged from the barn, and the world tilted sideways. He was older, his face weathered by sun and time, his hair longer than she remembered. He walked with a slight limp that had not been there before. But the eyes were the same, that particular shade of hazel green, and the way he moved, economical and purposeful, was achingly familiar. Marcus stopped dead when he saw her, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and something that might have been fear. They stared at each other across the dusty yard, 15 years collapsing into nothing. Willa. His voice was hoarse, uncertain. She could not speak, could not breathe. Her hands were shaking, so she gripped the side of the wagon to steady herself. They told me you were dead. My father said you died in Silver Creek. He buried you. Marcus took a step forward, then another, moving slowly like she was a wild thing that might bolt. I almost did. The fever was bad. I was out of my head for weeks. By the time I recovered enough to send word, I heard your father had sold the ranch and moved away. I did not know where you had gone. I tried to find out, but nobody knew for sure. Someone said San Francisco, someone else said back east. I looked for a while, but the trail went cold. Why did you not try harder? The words came out sharper than she intended, 15 years of grief and anger surfacing all at once. I did try. For 2 years I followed every lead I could find, but Willa, you have to understand. I was nobody, a cowhand with nothing to offer. Your father had made it clear he had bigger plans for you. I thought maybe it was better, cleaner, if you thought I was gone. You could move on, build a life without being tied to a ghost. You do not get to make that choice for me, she said, her voice shaking. You do not get to decide that losing you was better for me. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the scar on his jaw, the new lines around his eyes. You are right. I am sorry. I have regretted it every day since. But I convinced myself it was the right thing, that you were better off. I was 15. I loved you. And then you were gone, and I had to figure out how to keep living with this hole in my chest that never healed. Marcus's face crumpled. I loved you too. I never stopped. But you were so young, and I was afraid of what it meant, what it would cost you. Your father would have thrown me off the ranch, or worse if he knew. And then when I woke up in that room in Silver Creek, more dead than alive, all I could think about was how I never told you the truth. How I tried to do the noble thing, and it just made everything harder. Willa felt tears streaming down her face, hot and unchecked. You should have told me. That night in the barn, you should have told me. I know. I was a coward. They stood there, the weight of 15 years between them, all the pain and longing and missed chances. Finally, Willa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and straightened her shoulders. I am here on business. My uncle's company received a request from this ranch for supply services. I am here to assess needs and negotiate terms. Can you direct me to the owner? Marcus smiled, sad and wry. You are looking at him. Well, co-owner. My partner handles the horse breeding. I manage the cattle operation. This is our place. Oh, she did not know what else to say. The universe had a sense of humor, apparently, or a cruel streak. Come inside. We can talk business. And maybe, if you are willing, we can talk about everything else too. He gestured toward the house, a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch. Willa followed him, her mind reeling. The house was neat, clearly lived in but well kept. There was a large kitchen with a table that could seat 8, a sitting room with comfortable furniture and bookshelves, details that spoke of someone making a real home. Marcus poured coffee from a pot on the stove and sat across from her at the table, and for a moment it felt surreal, like they were playing at being adults having a normal conversation. Tell me about your life, he said. Tell me everything. I want to know who you became. So she did. She told him about Sacramento, about school and work, about becoming a partner in her uncle's business. She told him about her father's death, her mother's remarriage, the small house she owned. She told him about the life she had built, piece by piece, in the wreckage of losing him. He listened with that same focused attention she remembered, asking questions, making connections, seeing her. Then it was his turn. He told her about Silver Creek, about waking up to find out the world thought he was dead, about slowly recovering, about the long months of physical therapy to get his strength back and deal with the damage to his leg. He told her about working his way up, saving money, learning everything he could about ranching. He told her about meeting his partner, a man named Daniel Foster who had inherited land and needed someone who understood cattle. Together, they had built this place from almost nothing, and now it was thriving. I never married, Marcus said quietly. There were women, a few, over the years, but none of them were you. I tried to move on, I really did. But you were always there in the back of my mind, the standard against which everyone else fell short. I did not marry either, Willa said. For the same reasons. They looked at each other across the table, and the air between them felt charged, full of possibility and fear. What do we do now? Marcus asked. I do not know. Part of me wants to run to protect myself from getting hurt again. Part of me wants to stay and see if we can salvage something from this wreckage. I want you to stay. I want a chance to make up for lost time if that is even possible. But I understand if you cannot. I understand if I destroyed any chance we might have had. Willa took a deep breath, weighing options, listening to her heart. I need time. I need to process this, to figure out what I feel beyond the shock and the anger, but I am willing to try. For business, certainly. We can set up the supply contract, and maybe while we work together we can figure out the rest. Relief flooded Marcus's face. I will take that. Whatever you are willing to give, I will take. They spent the rest of the afternoon going over the ranch's needs, quantities, delivery schedules, prices. It was easier to focus on practical matters, to let the familiar rhythm of business negotiations create a safe space. By the time Willa climbed back into her wagon to head home, they had the framework of an agreement, and something fragile and tentative that might become more. Over the following weeks, Willa made regular trips to Clearwater Springs. She told her uncle the account required personal attention, and he was happy to let her handle it. Each visit, she and Marcus learned each other again, discovering who they had become, finding echoes of who they had been. They went riding together, and it felt like coming home, like finding a piece of herself she had lost. Marcus had given her Juniper when they left Nevada. The mare had died of old age years ago, but he had a paint horse now, a gelding named Scout, who reminded her so much of Juniper it made her heart ache. They talked endlessly, filling in the years, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Marcus showed her the ranch, introduced her to the hands who worked there, the animals they were raising, the plans they had for expansion. She met Daniel Foster, a quiet man with a quick smile who clearly thought the world of Marcus and was delighted to see his partner finally show interest in someone. Slowly, carefully, they moved from friends to something more. It was different from when they were young, weighted with experience and loss, but also deeper, more intentional. Marcus courted her properly, asking permission to hold her hand, to kiss her, treating every step like the precious thing it was. Willa let herself open up, let herself trust, even though it terrified her. 3 months after their reunion, on a cold January evening, Marcus asked her to stay for dinner. Daniel was away visiting family, so it was just the two of them in the big house. Marcus cooked, surprisingly competent, and they ate by the fire, talking about nothing and everything. After dinner, he took her hand and led her to the sitting room, and his expression was so serious she felt her heart start to race. I have been thinking, he said, about second chances and wasted time and what it means to be given a gift you do not deserve. Willa, I lost you once because I was too afraid to claim what I wanted, too convinced I was not good enough for you. I am not going to make that mistake again. I love you. I have loved you since you were 15 years old and determined to learn to ride. I loved you when I thought I was dying in Silver Creek. I loved you every day of the 15 years we were apart. And I love you now, maybe even more, because now I know what it costs to lose you. I am asking you to marry me, to build a life with me, to give me the chance to spend every remaining day proving I am worthy of your trust. Willa felt tears spilling over, but she was smiling, her whole body light with joy. Yes, yes, of course, yes. I love you too, Marcus. I never stopped. It feels like my whole life has been pointing toward this moment, toward finding our way back to each other. He kissed her then, deep and sweet, and it felt like healing, like all the broken pieces finally clicking into place. They married in March, a small ceremony in Sacramento with her family and a few close friends. Daniel stood up as Marcus's best man, grinning the whole time. Willa wore a simple dress the color of cream, and Marcus wore his best suit, and when they exchanged vows, there was not a dry eye in the room. The weight of their history made every word more meaningful, every promise more profound. Willa moved to the ranch, bringing her belongings and her business with her. She set up an office in one of the spare rooms and continued managing accounts, now with the convenience of being on site for one of their biggest clients. She and Marcus fell into a rhythm, learning the give and take of living together, of building a shared life. They rode together in the mornings before the day's work began, just like old times, except now they were equals, partners in every sense. Life was not without challenges. Running a ranch was hard, unpredictable work. There were droughts and sick cattle, difficult neighbors and financial pressures, but they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. Marcus was steady and strong, but he also knew when to lean on Willa, when to ask for help. She loved that about him, the way he trusted her competence, her judgment. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sunset paint the hills gold and purple. Marcus would tell her about his day, and she would tell him about hers, and they would plan for the future. They talked about expanding the horse breeding operation, about maybe starting a training program for young horses. They talked about children, about whether they wanted them, and when. Willa got pregnant in their second year of marriage. She was 32, and while that was older than many women having their first child, she felt ready in a way she would not have been when she was younger. The pregnancy was uncomplicated, and Marcus was attentive without being overbearing, excited but also terrified in a way she found endearing. Their son was born in late January, during a cold snap that froze the water troughs and made everyone hurry through their chores. He came fast, the way first babies sometimes do not, and by the time the midwife arrived, Willa had already done most of the work. Marcus had stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, and when the baby finally arrived, red-faced and screaming, he cried as hard as Willa did. They named him Matthew James Reeves, and he was perfect. He had Willa's dark hair and Marcus's eyes, and from the very beginning, he was curious and alert, always watching, always taking things in. Marcus was a natural father, patient and playful, carrying Matthew around the ranch and narrating everything they saw. Willa loved watching them together, loved seeing this new dimension of the man she loved. When Matthew was 2, Willa got pregnant again. This time it was twins, 2 girls who arrived early and scared everyone half to death but ultimately were healthy and strong. They named them Elena Rose and Clara Me, and suddenly the house was full of noise and chaos, and so much love it felt like the walls could barely contain it. Marcus thrived as a father. He taught Matthew to ride as soon as the boy was big enough to sit a horse, the same way he had taught Willa all those years ago. He was patient with Elena's endless questions and Clara's quiet intensity, giving each child what they needed. Willa managed the business side of the ranch and raised their children, and somehow kept everything running, and she had never felt more exhausted or more fulfilled. The years passed in a blur of birthday parties and school pageants, roundups and foaling seasons, good years and hard years. Matthew grew tall and serious, devoted to the ranch in ways that made Marcus beam with pride. Elena became a gifted rider, fearless and skilled, while Clara preferred working with the account books, her mind sharp with numbers just like her mother. They were each their own person, and Willa and Marcus gave them room to grow while also providing roots, stability, love. Daniel Foster retired when Matthew was 15, selling his share of the ranch to Marcus and Willa with the understanding that Matthew would eventually take over. It was a good transition, carefully planned, and Daniel moved to San Francisco to be near his sister, visiting often and always welcome. Willa's mother passed away peacefully when the twins were 12, surrounded by family. It was sad but also a relief after a long illness, and Willa grieved but also felt grateful for the years they had had, for the way her mother had embraced Marcus and loved her grandchildren fiercely. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Marcus surprised Willa with a trip. He arranged for Matthew and the twins to stay with friends, and he took her back to Nevada, to Tonopah Junction. The town had changed, grown and modernized, the silver mines mostly played out but new industries moving in. The ranch where she had grown up was gone, torn down and replaced by a stamping mill. But the desert was the same, vast and beautiful and unforgiving. They rode out into the backcountry, just the two of them, camping under the stars the way they used to. Marcus had brought supplies, including a ridiculous amount of her favorite foods, and they spent 3 days riding and talking and making love under the open sky. On the last night, as they lay wrapped in blankets and watching the stars wheel overhead, Marcus said, "Do you ever regret it?" "The years we lost, the way things happened," Willa thought about it, really considered the question. "I regret that you almost died. I regret that we both suffered, but I do not regret who we became in those years apart. I think we needed that time to grow into people who could build what we have now. When I was 15, I loved you with all my heart, but I did not really understand what that meant, what it would require. Now I do, and I would not trade what we have for anything, not even to erase the pain." Marcus pulled her closer, his lips against her hair. "I love you, Willa Reeves. You are the best thing that ever happened to me then and now and always." "I love you too," she whispered. "Thank you for teaching me to ride. Thank you for waiting for me. Thank you for being exactly who you are." They returned to the ranch renewed, reconnected, ready for whatever came next. Matthew was talking about wanting to expand into breeding quarter horses specifically for ranch work, and Marcus thought it was a brilliant idea. Eleanor was courting a young man from a neighboring ranch, and Clara was making noise about maybe going to school for business, learning new methods they could apply at home. The ranch was thriving, the family was healthy, and the future looked bright. As the years continued to unfold, Willa and Marcus settled into the comfortable rhythm of a long, well-loved marriage. They still rode together when they could, still talked for hours on the porch, still looked at each other with the wonder of two people who had found each other against all odds. There were grandchildren eventually, Matthew's children and Eleanor's, and the house rang with young voices again. On their 30th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. There was a huge dinner with everyone's favorite foods, music and dancing, toasts that made everyone laugh and cry. Late in the evening, after the younger children had been put to bed and the adults were sitting around talking, Matthew stood up and called for everyone's attention. "I want to say something about my parents," he said, looking at Willa and Marcus. "Growing up, I always knew I was lucky. I had parents who loved each other, who loved us, who built something real and lasting. But it was not until I was older that I understood the whole story, how they found each other young, lost each other, and then against all odds found each other again. That kind of love, that kind of commitment, it does not happen by accident. It happens because two people decide, every single day, to choose each other, to do the work, to forgive and grow and build something bigger than themselves. You two taught me what it means to really love someone, and I am grateful every day for that example." So here is to Willa and Marcus Reeves, who proved that true love is worth fighting for, worth waiting for, worth everything. Everyone raised their glasses, and Willa felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. Marcus squeezed her hand, his eyes bright with emotion, and she knew he was feeling the same overwhelming gratitude, the same sense of how improbably blessed they were. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Willa and Marcus stood on the porch, watching their family scatter to their homes and rooms. The ranch was quiet under the stars, the same stars that had watched over them that summer when she was 15, the same stars that had seen them through separation and loss and finally reunion. "We did it," Marcus said softly. "We built a good life." "We did," Willa agreed. "Despite everything, we did." He put his arm around her shoulders and she leaned into him, solid and warm in hers. They stood there for a long time, grateful for the past, content with the present, and hopeful for the future. The cowboy who had taught her to ride had become the man who taught her what it meant to really love, to really live. And that, Willa thought, was the greatest gift of all. In the years that followed, they continued the work of living, of tending to the ranch and the family and each other. Marcus's limp got worse as he aged, the old bullet wound making itself known, but he never complained, just adjusted how he did things. Willa's hair turned silver, and she wore it long, braided down her back the way she had as a girl. They were grandparents and great-grandparents, advisors and storytellers, the heart of a family that had grown beyond anything they could have imagined. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, they would ride out together, moving slower now but still moving, still seeking that sense of freedom and connection that had first brought them together. Marcus would look over at her, and she would catch him watching, and they would smile, communicating in the wordless language of people who had known each other for decades. When Marcus was 75, he had a stroke. It was mild, relatively speaking, but it slowed him down significantly. Willa became his caretaker, managing his medications and exercises with the same competence she brought to everything. He hated being dependent, but he also trusted her completely, and gradually he learned to accept the help with grace. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by family. A huge gathering that included children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, friends and neighbors and people whose lives they had touched over the decades. There were speeches and tears and laughter, and when someone asked Marcus for the secret to a long, happy marriage, he looked at Willa and said, "Marry your best friend. Marry the person who sees you clearly and loves you anyway. Marry someone you can talk to for hours and never run out of things to say. And then, every single day, choose them again. It is that simple and that hard," Willa added, "and never forget the gift of second chances. Life is unpredictable and love is rare. When you find it, hold on tight and do not let go." As the sun set on that golden day, Willa and Marcus sat together on the porch swing they had installed decades ago, watching their family spread across the yard, listening to the sound of children playing and adults talking. The ranch stretched around them, solid and enduring, a testament to their hard work and shared dreams. "I would do it all again," Marcus said suddenly. "Every hard day, every mistake, every moment of doubt, if it led me here to this, I would do it all exactly the same." Willa reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining automatically, a habit worn smooth by thousands of repetitions. "So would I. You are my home, Marcus Reeves. You always have been." He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. "And you are mine, Willa Reeves. My first love, my only love, my always love." They sat together as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched a 15-year-old girl fall in love with a 23-year-old cowboy. The same stars that had kept their secrets through years of separation. The same stars that bore witness now to a love that had endured, deepened, and ultimately triumphed. Inside the house, someone started playing a piano, and the sound drifted out through the open windows. It was one of the twins, Clara, playing the old songs they all knew by heart. People began to sing, voices blending together in harmony. Matthew came out to the porch and smiled at his parents, still sitting close together, still holding hands after all these years. "You two okay out here?" he asked. "Perfect," Willa said. "We are perfect." Matthew nodded and went back inside, and Willa and Marcus returned to their comfortable silence. There was nothing left that needed saying. No words that could improve on the simple fact of being together, of having made it through everything and arrived here, at this moment of peace. As the evening deepened and the music continued, Willa thought about the girl she had been, desperate to escape Tanapa Junction, convinced the desert held nothing for her. She thought about the woman she had become, shaped by loss and resilience, and ultimately by a love that refused to die. She thought about Marcus, the boy who had taught her to ride, who had become the man who taught her everything else that mattered. Life, she had learned, was not a straight line. It curved and looped back on itself, bringing you to places you never expected, reconnecting you with people you thought you had lost forever. The key was to remain open, to keep believing in possibility even when hope seemed foolish. The key was to never stop choosing love, even when love had hurt you, even when the odds seemed impossible. The ranch would continue after they were gone. Matthew and his children would carry it forward, adding their own chapters to the story. But what Willa and Marcus had built together, the legacy of their love, that would endure in ways both visible and invisible. It would live in the way their children loved their spouses, in the way their grandchildren approached challenges, in the stories told around future fires. Marcus's head drooped onto her shoulder, and she realized he had dozed off, lulled by the music and the warmth and the feeling of safety that came from being home. She sat very still, not wanting to wake him, content to be his resting place as he had so often been hers. The moon rose, full and bright, painting everything silver. Willa looked out at the ranch, at the barns and pastures, at the horses standing sleepy in the moonlight. She thought about Juniper, the paint mare who had carried her into freedom all those years ago. She thought about every ride, every conversation, every moment that had led her to exactly where she was supposed to be. "Thank you," she whispered to the universe, to fate, to whatever force had seen fit to give them a second chance. "Thank you for bringing him back to me. Thank you for all of it." The night had no answer except the continuing music, the sound of family, the steady rhythm of Marcus's breathing against her shoulder. And that, Willa thought, was answer enough. That was everything. She closed her eyes and let herself drift, held safe in the knowledge that she was loved, that she had loved well, that the story she and Marcus had written together was one worth telling. It was a story about a girl and a cowboy, about horses and the desert, about loss and perseverance and the stubborn refusal to give up on love. It was their story, hard-won and precious, and it had turned out exactly right. Years later, when both Willa and Marcus were gone, their grandchildren would tell the story to their own children. They would talk about the summer of 1874, when a 15-year-old girl learned to ride from a 23-year-old cowboy. They would talk about separation and grief, about 15 years of thinking the other was lost. They would talk about the miraculous reunion, the way two people who were meant to be together found their way back despite everything. And they would end the story the way all good stories end, with the simple truth that love, real love, endures. It might be tested, broken, scattered to the winds. But if it is true, if it is meant to be, it finds a way. It comes home. It heals. And it creates something beautiful that echoes down through generations. A testament to the power of two hearts that refuse to give up on each other. The ranch still stands, passed down through the family, a working operation that honors its history while embracing the future. And on quiet evenings when the work is done and the stars are out, you can almost see them there on the porch, Willa and Marcus, still together, still in love, still proving that some bonds are stronger than death, stronger than time, stronger than anything the world can throw at them. Their story began with a riding lesson and ended with a lifetime of love. And in between, they lived fully, loved deeply, and created something that would never be forgotten. That is what matters in the end, not the obstacles overcome or the years lost, but the simple fact of choosing each other, every single day until the very last one. The cowboy taught her to ride, and in doing so, taught her everything else that mattered. And she taught him that love, true love, is worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth everything. Together, they proved that second chances are real, that lost loves can be found again, and that the greatest adventure of all is building a life with the person who sees your soul.